Perfect. Hello, everyone. How are you? My name is Vidette Coleman Robinson, and I am the Executive Director of the Association of African American Museums. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday. I hope you're like me and you're drinking tons of coffee today, this morning, just to, make sure that your eyes are open and your soul is open and ready for this amazing information that we're going to receive from our wonderful partners and our institutional members, the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. The superintendent for this trail is Dr. Joy Kennard, and then her staff, Mrs. Shirley Baxter, who is supervisory park ranger. Thank you so much, Shirley, for being on. And then a couple of partners, Dr. Janice Franklin. Am I saying that right, Janice? I don't want to be Janice. And I'm fine. Woo! Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Dr. Janice Franklin, who is at Alabama State University, and Dr. Howard Robinson, who is also, and I know I'm saying that correctly, so I don't have to ask you that question, Dr. Robinson. Thank you guys so much. We're just going to get directly into today's event. Joy asked me about a month ago if we could just have AAAM show up and show out for their interpretive center. So today's event is displaying the truth in the digital age. And I don't think that we can get any more perfect than that, because COVID-19 has thrown us into the digital age. So without further ado, I'm going to pass my mic over to Joy. And thank you again for being here. I'm going to put myself on mute because it's not my show anymore. It's Joy.
Thank you so much, Vidette. My name is Joy Kennard, and I'm the superintendent of the Tuskegee Institute National Historic Site, the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site, and the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. The trail is the only trail in the National Trail System that honors African American history, which captures the events that led up to each march, which were inappropriate administered tests given to applicants registering for the right to vote, who endured humiliation at the highest levels in the nation. The perseverance of these applicants endured public beatings by police in front of the courthouse in Selma. Some of these people were in the Courageous Eight, C.T. Vivian's, Reverend Orange, along with hundreds of children and youth who protested so their parents and teachers wouldn't lose their jobs. The death of Jimmy Lee Jackson in nearby Marion, Alabama, Bloody Sunday, Turnaround Tuesday, and the epic Selma to Montgomery March, which took place on foot, which spanned 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. The whole way, these protesters were guarded by federal troops to protect them. Every day we celebrate this example of achievement, which embodies both unity and dignity. We share in the storytelling with an abundance of partners along this 54-mile trail. And one of those organizations that we have the honor to work with is Alabama State University, who houses the Montgomery Interpretive Center on their campus. You will now hear from Dr. Janice Franklin, Dean of the Levy Watkins Learning Center and the National Center for the Study of Civil Rights and African American Culture at Alabama State University. Dr. Franklin.
Thank you, Dr. Kennard, and also Ms. Robinson, and welcome to all of you in our audience today. I bring you greetings on behalf of our president at Alabama State University, Dr. Quentin Ross, and on behalf of the National Center for the Study of Civil Rights and African American Culture at Alabama State University. As project director of the center and dean of the library, I am extremely proud of our partnership with the National Park Service in establishing the third interpretive center for the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail that celebrates Montgomery's voting rights history on the campus of Alabama State University, the university at the heart of the modern civil rights movement. Today's virtual charrette discussion provides a unique opportunity for all of our external partners to give us valuable insight for the expansion of our center with exhibits that will fully engage visitors in the digital age. While our site currently examines the important role of the student movement, including the role of historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, like ASU and Tuskegee, today we have the opportunity to discuss ways to interpret the entire Montgomery story and its impact on the world. Imagine, if you will, the marchers arriving at the state capitol and Dr. King's historic speech with the refrain of "How long, not long," and the series of events in the aftermath of the march that launched the voting rights movement to an international stage with the signing of the 1965 Voting Rights Bill. In conclusion, now more than ever, the past meets the present with current issues of voter suppression and the urgency of social justice. We thank you in advance for your participation today to ensure that our exhibits are engaging, innovative, and inviting to all that will visit our center at the completion of this project. I would also like to thank the National Park Foundation for their significant support of the Montgomery Interpretive Center, Ms. Robinson, and Superintendent Dr. Joy Kennard and other staff that worked so closely with her to facilitate today's discussion, along with the members of the Association of the African American Museums. It is our intent, with your help, to distinguish this center as one of the leading National Park Service sites that preserves legacies and honors the importance of voting rights as the cornerstone of our democracy. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Franklin, for your very kind words and your warm welcome. Dr. Robinson, I hear that you have something you want to say.
Yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the Interpretive Center and Alabama State's involvement, and then weave into that conversation some background about the history of the Selma to Montgomery March and the Voting Rights Campaign, if you all would, indulge me. This when I talk about some of the dates and the timeline here, it might be a little bit of a shock to people, but back in 2007, Dr. Franklin approached myself and Dr. Dorothy Autry at Alabama State University. Dr. Autry was then the chair of the History and Political Science Department. And she talked about there being a third interpretive center on the 54-mile trek and historic trail from Selma to Montgomery. And that interpretive center, they had already been designated a site in Selma and in Lowndes County, and there needed to be a site in Montgomery. And she thought about, we wanted us to sort of investigate and maybe throw our hat in the ring to determine whether we should that final site should be located in or around Alabama State University. And she asked us to do some research to determine whether Alabama State was an appropriate site. And that research, I think, convinced us of a number of things. One, we understood, or more clearly understood as a result of the research, that the students played a very significant and integral role in the voting rights campaign. And we sort of knew from sort of the local lore that there had been a number of protests, in March of 1965, and that there had been horses and posse men riding those horses who had attacked students. But we didn't really understand the connection between those protests occurring in Montgomery, Alabama, and those protests involving students, and the larger voting rights campaign, what was happening in Selma. And so we asked the question, why? And so several answers sort of surfaced pretty quickly. One was that the organization driving what was happening in Montgomery was SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And right after Bloody Sunday, the students had sort of split from the SCLC. So they left the SCLC in Selma and they migrated to Montgomery. So you really had two parallel sets of protests. One set of protests occurring in Selma and continuing in Selma, but another front opened up in Montgomery. And that front was really populated and animated by students. And so it was around spring break, so you had a number of students coming to Montgomery from schools all over the nation. Instead of going to sort of a traditional spring break, you had almost 800 students from Tuskegee come to Montgomery. And then really this was part of a directive from SNCC, and the executive director of SNCC, James Foreman, had asked students to do one of three things: come to Montgomery, protest where in their respective locales, or to go to the nation's capital to put pressure on the federal government to push for voting rights. And so you had about 15,000 students show up at the nation's capital and they were engaged in protests for almost really 2 weeks. President Lyndon Johnson's complained about not being able to concentrate and his daughter not being able to do their homework because the students had been chanting and in Lafayette Square across the street from the Capitol for weeks. And students had sat inside the United States Capitol. They really put pressure on the federal government in DC. But you also had students protest in dozens of cities all across the nation. And then you had about 4,000 students descend on Montgomery. And so I think in tandem with the actual Selma to Montgomery March, Bloody Sunday, it was also these protests that sprouted up all across the nation. The protest in Montgomery and the protest that was occurring in Washington, D.C. that created or helped to create the sense of urgency for voting rights legislation. Okay, and one of the things that I think is important to understand also is that the protest that was occurring, and particularly spearheaded by both SNCC and the SCLC, was taking place in throughout the Black Belt, around 7 or 8 Black Belt counties. And so this is not only a celebration or recognition of the activities of the people in Dallas County and Montgomery County, but also in Perry County and Wilcox County and other Black Belt counties where young people and older adults both protested in their respective counties, but sent people to both Selma and then eventually to Montgomery to protest. And so once we uncovered that the extent of student activism, we really threw our hat into this competition or process by which the National Park Service laid out in order to qualify for the being awarded the interpretive center. And so in 2008, Alabama State was designated the preferred site. And then between 2008 and 2011, the National Park Service conducted an environmental assessment, and there was other types of reviews. And then in 2011, ASU was officially designated the official site for the interpretive center. And between 2017 and 2020, the building was conceptualized and constructed. And in February of 2020, there was a stakeholders reception and a soft opening. And that was just a weekend long opening. And then the interpretive center had to close because of COVID. Now, what is in the interpretive center, really you could look at it as 3 phases. The first phase was is a long hallway, and there's you interpret the events that occur in Montgomery and those young people coming to Montgomery from Tuskegee and schools throughout the nation, and then the major episodes of the movement in that period. However, you move into another space. It's really a 3-dimensional space with mannequins that highlights the last or the 4th campsite at the city of St. Jude and the Night of the Stars. And then then you go beyond that, and there's a large space, and I think that's the space that we're it's under consideration today, and we're talking about in terms of this space is going to be interpreted. And we look at that interpretation as an exhibit space that represents Montgomery and beyond. When the marchers are coming to Montgomery, what they experience in Montgomery, and then the episodes connected to the voting rights campaign that emerge from Montgomery. So the last leg to the state capitol is I think really critical in this interpretation. And we look at, and if you look back in 1965, as the march emanates from Lowndes County, where there's only 2 lanes, the marchers had been restricted to only 300 people. But once you get to Montgomery County, it opens up, and there's no restrictions on the number of people who could join the march. And so the march swells significantly as it enters Montgomery and nears the city of St. Jude and the last campsite. And so these are the types of events that we want to look at in this last in this space, in this part of the interpretation. The marchers actually stop at the airport and welcome people who are coming into Montgomery to participate. And then you have one of the areas that I think we should look at, and I think is important, is those individuals who are going to make that entire trek. So the people who started in Dallas County, made that whole entire trek. Those 300 people who were able to make it, who were designated to come through and march through Lowndes County and then march the rest of the way into Montgomery. When they got to Montgomery, they were given orange vests that distinguished them from other marchers. And so those orange vests, I think, are important. And we see them in some of the exhibits in the Montgomery Interpretive Center. Also the media coverage. The Selma Montgomery March was covered not only by media outlets throughout the nation, but also throughout the world. And then the participants, the people who marched were not just people come from other parts of the world or even other parts of the nation, but local folks and people from the surrounding Black Belt counties. And then I think we looked at, and you have to look at the types of reception that the marchers get when they come to Montgomery. And that really is 2 types of receptions. It's a reception from white Montgomery, and it's a reception from Black Montgomery. So the governor urges white folks to stay at home, not to come out to the march. State offices and state buildings are closed for the Montgomery March. Teachers are threatened by the state superintendent that if they don't maintain the numbers of students in their classrooms, that they could affect their raises, it could affect their tenure, and it could affect their livelihood. And so there is significant hostility, local hostility to the march, and I think that needs to be explored. But on the other hand, you have the Montgomery Improvement Association that has tentacles throughout Montgomery. And so they activate area churches, Montgomery churches, who then house people, allow people access to water and restrooms and refreshments. People who open their homes. There's thousands of marchers in Montgomery from all over the nation and the world. And people open their homes in Montgomery and allow these folks respite and food. And then you have folks like Reverend Boone, who's an Alabama State graduate, who then moves ahead of the march, organizes about 800 Alabama State students to come over and meet the marchers as they enter Montgomery. And then you have really the culmination of the march at the state capitol. And there's some discrepancy as always there always is about how many people that was. There were. And so some would say there were 30,000, other sources say there were 50,000. Nevertheless, you had significant thousands of people descend on the state capitol and make that final trek up Dexter Avenue to the state capitol. And it's important to note that the state of Alabama did not allow any of the marchers or any march participants to occupy any state property. And so the flatbed truck that housed the speakers was set up on the street in front of the Capitol. Right. And so I think that we have to interpret that or think about that as we interpret this last space. And of course, there's the student subtext. We interviewed a number of students, and there were hundreds of students who left area schools to participate in that march. And you could see some of the students from the private schools, in their school colors, and so this was an eclectic group of people. And I think that we should spend some time trying to interpret the participants. And then, of course, you had the speakers. And not only did you have Rosa Parks, and for those people like my professor, Dr. Dorothy Orchard, who insisted that the civil rights movement, ends in 1965 in earnest. Rosa Parks is one of those speakers, really providing a bookend from 1955 with the Montgomery bus boycott to 1965 with the Selma to Montgomery March. It certainly is a phase of the modern civil rights movement that begins and ends in Montgomery. And I think that would deserve some attention. But you had a whole slate of other speakers, and those speeches have been recorded, and we have access to those speeches, and so that I would imagine be interesting. But then at the same time, you have the march culminating in Montgomery. Of course, you have the shooting and the death of Viola Luiso, which sparks a whole other set of issues. A few days after the march, there is what they call the Mothers March, and a group of women lead a march to the state capitol, and they place 10 caskets on the state capitol steps. And the caskets have the names of individuals, including Viola Luiso, the names of individuals who were killed in pursuit of voting rights and civil rights in the state of Alabama in the previous years. And so then, of course, you have several months later, the 1965 August 6th signing of the Voting Rights Act. And of course, that deserves significant attention in this exhibit. One of the other offshoots of the march, as the marches are moving up through Lowndes County, Stokely Carmichael accompanies the march, not with the intent of participating, but with the intent of developing contacts in Lowndes County. And so as the march moves through Lowndes County, he steps off of the march and starts to engage people who are on the side of the road looking at the marches pass by in Lowndes County. And then he develops the contacts and returns to Lowndes County the very next week, and helps to organize the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which is an independent political party, which according to Alabama law requires a emblem or symbol to connote that party. And they choose a Black Panther. And so the first Black Panther Party has its origins, as a direct offshoot of the Selma to Montgomery March in Lowndes County. And then I think for this interpretive space, we need to look at the movement and the voting rights campaign after and beyond Montgomery. What is the impact of the Voting Rights Act on American politics? How does the electorate expand as a result of this legislation? And there's significant studies that look at that. Not only do you have an explosion of Black registration, but you have the enlargement of white registration, counter registration also. Of course, you have the beginning of the realignment of the party system in the United States, growing out of the Voting Rights Act. And like I said, you had an explosion, Black elected officials. And that still reverberates. It reverberates in the election of Barack Obama. It reverberates in just recently in the election of Joseph Biden. And we still saw how Black voters in South Carolina changed the trajectory of the most recent presidential campaign. And then, of course, we saw the impact of Black voters in Georgia with the election of John Ossoff and Ralph Warnock. And then, of course, there's the international impact. And I think that we need to pay some attention to that also. Black protest. And I'm gonna wrap up in a second. Black protest and the legislative victory in the United States reverberates throughout the world. And so it takes us to today. And today, I think we also have to pay homage to and take into consideration the attacks on the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County versus Holder case of 2013. And of course, its remedy in the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2021. Ideally, we will have a Voting Rights Act in 2021. So this is, in essence, a background of the voting rights campaign and some of the issues that flow from that campaign. I think we need to consider for this interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson. Thank you, thank you. Shirley, you have a presentation that has been queued up. We are ready for you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. First, I'm going to give you a background of the site, and then we'll look at the concepts. And then the most important part of this whole presentation is getting your ideas on these concepts. Trying to go to the next slide, Camille. Not wanting to go.
Try hitting enter and or the forwarding arrow.
I've tried enter and the arrow.
Okay,
It's like is it frozen? Is it frozen on you? Can you move them?
No, try on your screen and you should see a forwarding arrow on your screen. See if that works for you.
Forwarding arrow.
Yeah, click on your screen. Click on your screen.
Okay. Oh, there. Okay. It works. Yay. So this is the legislation for the site. The trail, it consists of 54 miles from Brown Chapel in Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery. And it focuses on the need for voting rights legislation. It also designates the National Park Service as the keeper of the trail, and that we're the ones that manage it. And we also are supposed to work with other partners to accomplish our mission. We have trail themes. Every national park has themes, and those themes create parameters for us for what the park focuses on in interpretation and education. It guides us with our interpretive programs that the park rangers and park guides do. It guides us with what publications we have. It also guides us with what things we have for sale in the gift shop. So those are all controlled by those themes. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, a way to look at the Voting Rights March story, is think of it as a puzzle. And we have all these pieces. There's individuals, there's organizations, there's emotions, there's all these things. And our responsibility is to put all those pieces together so that when it's all put together, you have this one picture that is overriding umbrella of the story. I think that's really important. So what we also do is we preserve and protect the trail, the things that are along the trail. We document and record. We've done oral histories. We have some more oral histories to do. It's important that we get those stories directly from the people that participated in the march. And we work together with our partners. We have a partner specialist that's on our team, and he's always working with partners. That's Jorge Acevedo. So we're looking at that also. And we're not just in a vacuum with the Voting Rights March. Think about all the human and civil rights, the struggle, and think of it as a timeline. And then you see that the 1965, but we also have the task to look at the whole struggle. And you look at what happens today, March 13th, 2021, what's going on today that connects us with the civil rights from the 1965. We provide a window into everything that was going on during that time. And I know you see the picture on the screen, you're thinking, why in the world is there a picture of a plant on this screen? And that's one thing that's important, is that that's one of those puzzle pieces. We're looking at what happened, what did they see on the march, what wildlife, what vantage points did they see? There's some beautiful scenes along Highway 80. What were they seeing? Because we add each of those to the puzzle. And also in a bigger scale, all those people that participated in the event, they were showing the world the importance of nonviolent protest. That was very important. The trail was designated in 1996, and we do have 3 interpretive centers on the trail. The Lowndes Interpretive Center looks at Tent City. The Selma Interpretive Center looks at the importance of the planning, and they also connect up with Marion, that's very important to the history of the trail. And then we have the Montgomery Interpretive Center that looks at that last leg of the march from the city of St. Jude to the Alabama State Capitol. Now, Dr. Robinson talked a little bit about what we have in the exhibits. We have a mixture of things, and then we have text panels, artifacts. We have a stage scene with mannequins, images, documents. We have a theater and a gift shop. He also mentioned that the space that we have, a very pretty large space, we're going to talk about that in a second. We have a pretty large space that right now has a temporary exhibit in there, art exhibit, but that's the space that we're looking at to put these proposed exhibits. And of course, everything is accessible, and that's definitely one thing that we will continue to have. And so kind of thinking for these exhibits for the future, and research has been done that when you have interactive exhibits, that it can engage the visitor more. So we like to have interactive exhibits that maybe use technology, but it draws those visitors in to the story. And we want to provide that atmosphere where they can feel as much as they can feel what the marchers are feeling. We want them to walk away with a memorable experience where they can get home, think about the relevancy of it, they can reflect on it, and look how they can connect it to their lives today. Now we wanted to give you a little bit of an image of like what the room looks like, the space. You can see the drawing there. It has about a little over 2,700 square foot footage. So it's a pretty good sized area. And you can see right now we have the artwork in there. So now we're going to talk about that. We have put together 4 concepts and be thinking about which one that you think fits best. We have concept 1 that looks at the last leg of the march from the city of St. Jude to the Capitol steps. We would focus on what were the marchers seeing during this part of the march? What was going on? What landmarks were they passing in? What was their experience? Concept 2 would focus on the program at the Capitol, Martin Luther King's speech. We'd also look at the motivations of the marchers. What made them participate in the march? You know, there were dangers. They knew there were dangers in participating, and what motivated them to do that? So what barriers did the segregations put in front of them to stop the march? Concept 3, we look at the entire march and then look at the aftermath. What effects did that have? We look at the legal aspects of the march. And why was the Stars for Freedom rally so important? And what inspired these celebrities to participate? And the 4th concept, we talk about the legal team for the march. We look at the diversity of the individuals who participated. They came from all aspects. It was from students to teachers, to medical personnel, to hairdressers. What were they motivated, and what was their role in the march? We asked the same question of the civil rights organizations. We have SNCC, we have NAACP. What was their role? And we look at the individuals and the organizations, and we say, how do they make a difference? So how is the world different today because of their involvement in the march? So as I mentioned, we would like you to see which one of these concepts fit the best, and be asking a couple other questions like, what audience do you think that we have? What stories? What could we do for multi-generational park users? But I think the most important piece is to think about those puzzle pieces and think about the top 3. What are 3 stories, 3 topics that we have to include? And if we didn't, it'd be a disservice to the center, and it'd be a disservice to the legacy. So think about those last 3 puzzle pieces and how we can put those with the puzzle. And then we have that whole complete picture for the visitor. So now we have the most important part. We want to hear from you all. And we've got a couple of us are gonna hopefully be able to record this, the information that you're giving us. We'd like you to maybe to please state your name before you give your input so we can give you that credit for that. Anybody want to start first? I know some of you guys out there, so don't make me call your names, because I will. Dorothy. Are you still on there, Dorothy Walker? She's
Yes,
ignoring me, Joy.
I'm here.
I'm there. You don't have to do it. I just know that. Hey, Dorothy, how you doing?
Hey, Shirley. Hey, everybody. Shirley, can you go back through the concepts again? Is there a way for you to put them all together on this slide?
Camille, how do I do that? I had trouble just going straight forward. Can I just go back? What if I escape and it'll show all of them and I can go one at a time? Would that work if I did? No, that's not going to work. I can tell you the concept. What if I read them to you? Would that work? Would that help, Dorothy? Okay, let me pull them out here. So concept 1 follows the path from the city of St. Jude. The marchers traveled through several historical neighborhoods and landmarks along the way to the Alabama State Capitol. Immerse the visitor in the experience of the final walk up to the Alabama State Capitol. And it would focus on the significant locations, activities that occurred with the marchers. So that's concept 1. Concept 2, the delivery of speeches and grievances, the general atmosphere of the historical moments on the steps of the Capitol. Why did they march? What motivated them? What did they sacrifice? And what inspired them to complete the trek, the 54 miles? And then what were the segregationists doing to create barriers? So that was concept 2. Concept 3 was the context of the entire march from the initiation of it into the aftermath, the legislative aspects of the movement, and then the Stars for Freedom rally. Why was that so important? And then concept 4 is the legal team. Who were they and what did they do? We look specifically at the diversity of the participants in the march and how their roles contributed to the success. We talked about, hairdressers, medical personnel, students, teachers, churches were involved. And then we also had the contributions of civil rights organizations. So we would look at the individuals and the organizations and look to see how did they make a difference by participating in this event. Did that help a little bit?
Hey, Shirley.
Uh-huh.
This is Teresa.
Hi.
I just want to let y'all know, if you go to our website, the park website, mps.gov/SEMO, you can get access to this PowerPoint to follow along with it. You just press on the top part where it says alerts and click on the public lecture announcement or the more under it, and you should be able to go through it a page at a time.
Thanks, Teresa.
And one thing, if you want to take this and look at it and then send comments to me, that's fine too. I know sometimes you just need to ponder it for a while and think about it. That's fine too.
We placed the slideshow in the chat, so everyone should be able to access it. And let's see. I'm looking through it right now.
I think one of my comments would be actually something I picked up from Dr. Robinson. I think when he did a presentation either earlier this year or late last year for the Alabama Historical Association. And he's really the only person I've heard say this, and I'm sure he's not the only person that said it, but I'm sure there's he was the person that said it and it stuck with me, that I think the terminology of calling this the modern civil rights movement is something that needs to be explored and thought about, because one of the things he said in his presentation that stuck with me and really has changed the way I kind of talk about the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s is changing our terminology to the mid-century, the mid 20th century civil rights movement, because we're living in, one of the things he said is we're living in the modern civil rights movement now, and calling the 50s and 60s the modern civil rights movement, which I understand that is the historical terminology that we've used for this forever. I think there's a way to do both, because I mean, certainly I think all of the Park Service stuff and all of the history has been written to call it the modern civil rights movement. But I think if we're wanting to change people's minds and understanding that there is a movement happening now, I think we've got to change the way we're talking about this. And I thought that was very forward thinking when I heard him say that, because it is one of those things that stuck with me, that when we're talking about the 50s and 60s, we're talking about the mid 20th century civil rights movement and not the modern civil rights movement. So that's my only, I mean, without having time to really kind of look at all this, that's my only real concept. I mean, right now, just thinking about that. And the rural versus urban too. The movement that was happening, the voting rights movement that was happening in the rural communities, and of course I know Lowndes kind of represents that, but I think if we have a lot of visitors that land at Montgomery and don't make their way to Selma or Lowndes, and they're just going to see what's in the Montgomery Interpretive Center, I think having an understanding that how the movement played out in the rural community versus how it played out in the urban areas of Selma and Montgomery. And again, that may be something that's already in the exhibits, but I haven't seen them, so I wouldn't know. But and I'm saying that specifically. But I think that's an important thing to denote as well. So,
Thank you, Dorothy.
I had a question too. This is Janice Franklin. I was wondering where, or if there is an opportunity for us to look at some of the events that are not as well known, which lead or spring from the speeches at the steps. Of course, I think there's a need to do something to really spend time understanding Dr. King's speech and the significance of that speech, because it's so well known around the world for its phrases. But also the fact that there were important events which happened that same day, such as the killing of Mrs. Louiso, and the fact that, as Dr. Robinson mentioned, the beginnings of the Black Panther Party, and also political involvement by Blacks, and the fact that it takes that international leap to influence other countries like South Africa and other places around the world. I don't think that it has to have maybe each one of those events in a very chronological way. It might be that there's something that's interpretive, that interactive, that can tell you about events and the effect of the Selma and Montgomery March and how it changed the world, and also pay, I guess, attention to those martyrs who were killed as a result of these voting rights activities, all that is a part of the Selma and Montgomery March voting rights story. Just wondered if there are opportunities to do that as well.
I like that idea. I like it that, there's always, there are always the big names of people that we always focus on, but I think there's so many stories that include people that were not the main play, if you think of the main players. So I love that idea. And I love the idea of connecting it to other things that are on that timeline. Definitely. So I capture that, Dr. Franklin. I like that.
Right. And the issues of today, voter suppression, maybe something that allows young people to understand how the history really influences the world around us today. And I think that would be important too. They could have some areas in which they would imagine themselves as voters and like that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Following up on what Dr. Franklin said, I didn't see in any of the concepts, and again, I have to look more closely, about how people can get involved as a voter. So if we're going to bring it forward and encourage people and hopefully inspire people to be engaged civically, then I think there ought to be a way to tell them this is where you go to get more information about how to register, or what the registration requirements, seek out the registration requirements in your area, that kind of thing.
Right. I know that we have talked about, even with the Selma Interpretive Center, one of the things that was brought up was that we would look at maybe even creating some type of activity along that line and have a pledge from people of kids that they would be involved in certain things. They would go back and maybe become an activist, and what we would do is we would provide them different avenues to do that. So yeah, that's important.
Good morning, Shirley and the
Hey,
team. This
Robin.
is Robin. How are y'all this morning?
Good. How you doing, Robin?
Doing pretty good.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
And just say good morning.
Okay. I'm reviewing the concepts in which you have spoke about. And I was looking at concept 4.
Okay.
Looking at it because it talks about a combination of concepts 1, 2, and 3. Because within 1, 2, and 3, I see something that we can take out from each concept and then make it a whole package. For example, feature what happened at the steps of the Capitol. Yes, we as a team normally speak about what took place before those marchers step on that bridge. And then after that, it leads them down to Lowndes County, and from that point all the way to the Capitol, but we really don't get into exactly what happened, and as well as like Dr. Robinson had explained, there were other things going on within the community. In addition to taking something from concept 3 in regards to the legal legislative aspects of the movement and other catalysts, I like that bullet point, because a lot of people do not understand all of the legal ramifications that took place in order to make certain things happen. So that's an excellent idea. And also, as you know, another idea that was pulled out in regards to even in today, you know, we have this issue with all the youth and even adults are into social media, as well as with COVID going on. There are certain things that the concept may need to include, and I think there's something in here. And again, I'm not looking very closely the technology of it that needs to occur. You know, we speak about the oral histories and using those as a future vision. So hunking down on that and using that in the third space, as well as I like the idea of the traveling exhibit, because a lot of people are not going to be able to travel to the site, but having that traveling exhibit, it can bring and take that site to them. So my my thoughts are taking concept number 4 and doing a combination.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, Robin. Everyone, I am looking at our time and we are a little bit over. But this dialogue is always so incredible to me, and I could not bring myself to stop anyone or cut anyone off. And I was texting with Joy and I said, I see the time, so we're probably going to have to wrap up. George, I see your comment. I'm going to send it over to Shirley to email you back about, but I think that you are you're right on the mark there. George wants to know if you guys can all start as a professional discipline to refer to the ongoing movement as the civil rights movement in the 21st century. And I think that, you know, I always call it a tale of two movements. You know, it's the same thing, but it's just over several decades. So I feel like you really hit you knocked it out the park with that one. But I'm just looking at time, and I know that there's another event that we need to get to as well. Joy, do you want to do your closing remarks now?
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate all the feedback. I wish we could have heard from more people. I do thank all of you all for coming, and we look forward to moving forward on this. We did get a grant from the National Park Foundation to expand the story into the space Shirley spoke of. And so we're eager to move forward and get started. This is kind of the first phase of the timeline that we're working through. And so we will definitely be in touch with you guys. I encourage you all to email Shirley if you all have any additional remarks that you may think of later. But we will be moving forward with getting the staff involved, Alabama State University involved with the items collected here that you all brought up. And then we will be creating a scope of work and then moving forward to get contractors to be involved in what that area will look like. So we're hoping to hopefully have a contractor in place by the end of this fiscal year. That's what we're hoping. Dr. Franklin, Dr. Robinson, did you all have any last words?
No, again, I just echo your comments and thank everyone for their participation. We hope to get even more ideas and input. There are two other members of our team that are not on the call or not part of the program itself, and that's Ms. Destiny Williams and Dr. Dorothy Autry, who are part of all of our work with the National Park Service. And so again, thanks to everyone. That's what I'd like to say, please. Thank you.
I did also want to say that I really appreciate Shirley taking the lead on this. Thanks for all your hard work and with you and your team pulling this together. I want to thank the staff that are in the workshop. A lot of the people in the community that are here, I appreciate you all being on. Angel from the National Park Foundation, I appreciate you being on as well, along with members of my leadership team at the park, Jorge Acevedo and Robin Harris. So thank you all so much for coming, and I appreciate you all helping us prepare for this when we decided that we wanted to do it. And, you know, Vedette, Camille, I just want to thank you all for your leadership and the partnership we have been cultivating to really kind of create synergy nationally with AAAM. So thank you so much for all you do to support the national parks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Joy, I just wanted to ask really quickly, I know we're getting short on time, but is there anyone that's out there in our cyber audience that you want to kind of pick on like Shirley did with our dear friend Dorothy, to kind of have them have a question or two that they may have queued up or emailed you earlier? I don't have anything in the chat.
I just thank Dr. White for coming. I'm not sure if she has any comments. I know she does. The last charrette from Selma.
She does.
She's worked at Alabama State. She's done a lot with Jubilee celebrations through the years and even recently. And so
my only comment will always be remember the women. So
all right.
That will always be my comment. She who studies Black women. remember the women and make sure that, you know, their roles and their contributions are acknowledged in this effort. So right now, that's all I have to say. There were some, you know, there really were some good comments and good recommendations to come forward. So just remember the women.
Thank you, Dr. White. I knew you had something. I know a lot of you are hiding behind this virtual screen, but I could tell you when we're back in person, I'm going to be just like Dr. White probably is in her classroom, like, hey, whoever's sitting in the first row, I need you to speak. And you back there in the back. If there are no other questions or comments, Angel, I know it's already been said, but thank you so much. Thank you and the National Parks Foundation for what you do as far as collaborating with the National Park Service and just the community in general. If you would like to take your mic off just for a quick second and say a few things, that it would be greatly appreciated so that the rest of the community can know what you do and your mission.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just knew Vidette was going to pick with me. I was like, let me get ready now to speak. I put my car parked and removed my seatbelt. But this was one of the first, I'm the cultural project manager of cultural resources at the National Park Foundation. And this was one of the first projects and grant opportunities we were able to grant out last fiscal year to support the expansion of the African American Experience Fund. And this was, of course, prior to COVID. And like we said during the introductions, it's no better place than now to talk about civil rights in the digital age.
Thank you, Angel. And I also want to speak someone else's name, Floyd Myers. I replaced Floyd as a superintendent at the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. And he was the one who actually worked with Alabama State and the National Park Foundation to get the funding for the expansion of the exhibits. And so I just wanted to lift his name up because, you know, it wasn't me. I just stepped into this role and I'm trying to move the project forward. But I think he at least needs to be acknowledged and recognized for the hard work that he put into this specific grant, which is going to outlive his efforts and ours as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that he was mentioned during this workshop.
Thank you so much, Joy. So just so everyone knows, this event and session has been recorded. We will place it on our website, and everyone who registered today will receive the recording. You will also receive the link that Joy's team has on their website for this slideshow. That will also be on our website. And then from there, on Monday, we will roll it out to all of our members who are unable to join us today. And one of the things that I find usually with AAAM is they will comment. So Shirley, get ready. Get your little fingers ready in that keyboard. Ready, girl, because it's going to start smoking.
I'm ready.
Everybody's going to have something to say, and they because they want you to succeed. So I thank you guys so much. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for your overview. It was enriching, and we learned a lot. And I'm ready. I'm ready to come down. I'm ready to get vaccinated, put my mask on, because you still got to wear your mask once you get vaccinated. Just want to let you guys know that little piece of science. And then come down and check out what you guys have going on. It's an amazing project. Dr. Franklin, thank you so much just for being so generous with your time on a Saturday. I keep saying that not because I have to remind myself that it's Saturday. I woke up and thought it was Thursday. So have
you.
that. Yeah. Tons of strong coffee today. And I was like, oh, that's wrong. That's the wrong date. after a while, it starts to feel like Groundhog Day. But thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us today. And again, if you have any questions, Shirley, if you want to share your cell phone number, if you want smoke signals or message in a bottle or, you know, anything, well, don't share your cell phone. We're not going to do that to you, but your email is enough.
I was ready to do it, so.
I know, I don't want that out in the world.
Did you see my email? Did you see my email? Definitely if you have questions or anything. And we're looking at, in the next couple of weeks, if you can get information to us, emails to us within, I think it was the 27th, it's like 2 weeks from today. If you can do that, that'd be wonderful.
But that
wonderful. We'll put it on the like the deadline, the 27th. We'll write that on the website so people can know that, you know, you're looking for comments by the 27th. Yes, George.
Yeah, thank you.
One last thing, Shirley and I, we're doing this presentation again at 1 o'clock. It's going to be telephonic for people in the community who may not be connected to Zoom. And so the flyer, Shirley, is it on our website?
No.
Okay. So,
but if they're interested, if they email me, I can send it to them.
Okay.
You send me email there. I can send you that number and pass it.
So, just to let you guys know, if you want to join that, I know this is a Saturday. You have better things to do than have two of these presentations. But if you know of anyone who's interested, we will be doing this same presentation this afternoon. So,
I have to say, Joy, that the amount of thought that you and your staff have put into this is absolutely phenomenal. Being able to reach folks through Zoom, but then also having that thought and, you know, being able to say, you know, and care, and being able to say, we're going to have a second session back to back. Just for those who can't jump on Zoom. It's absolutely phenomenal. So kudos to you and your team just for allowing additional access to what you guys are doing. It is absolutely amazing. And thank you all for having the foresight to put this this presentation on your website because now it's totally accessible. And to me, no one can say that you haven't done your due diligence. They just can't.
Right. Thank you.
From my standpoint, you're covered.
Thank you. And if anyone wants the number, can I give it to them now? If they want.
Yes, go ahead and drop it in the chat.
Oh, drop it in the chat. Okay. Okay. Let me see. 1-800-656-2.
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Jorge Acevedo.
Hey, Jorge.
Hey, Jorge.
Hi, Jorge.
Hey. Well, Joy types in the number. I just want to thank all the partners that have engaged in this activity today. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. Obviously, the story is very moving to all of us, and we're looking forward to continue our collaboration to make it reach as many people as possible. And we know we have great partners as well that are telling other stories that are extremely important for the civil rights movement. And to Dorothy, you inspired that idea about starting to call it the civil rights movement in the 21st century, so we can be a little bit more up to date, but also recognizing that the struggle is still ongoing and people are still willing to put up the fight. So thank you.
And that was Dr. Robinson. I just stole it from him.
It's a community. It's a community. It's a community. It takes a village. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jorge.
All right.
Well, I've enjoyed my time with you all. I wish that we had a little bit more time just to hang out and maybe eat lunch, but Joy nor the National Park Foundation nor AAAM are going to pay for lunch. So I just want to say that, but thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And I know that the park does. The work that the National Park Service does is absolutely phenomenal. I used to wear green and gray, so everything that anybody in Park Service wants to do, I'm always open to it, especially as it has to do with African American history and culture, because these stories are undertold and underrepresented. So thank you again for just being able to present these ideas and concept choices to the public. I think that these are things that everyone needs to be able to do, and thank you for blazing the trail to you and your team.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.